looking at? I see here on the top line, 52.8 million, and here I see 55.2 million. What am I missing? What am I missing? That right there, that very top left-hand corner says 55 estimated revenues. And then over here on this page, are these different years, or what am I missing? Because this says 52 million on this little card that you just did. So
right.
which is it?
The $52 million the transfer in is recorded over here. It's netted out in the transfer.
It's a transfer in.
The in and out.
So part of the transfer is in there.
The in and out is netted.
Okay.
The
All right.
$2.3
I need to
million.
make an adjustment on that because I want to make sure that it is consistent with the numbers that you have.
Are you talking about these two?
Yes, that transfer in is in general fund.
The end number is right.
Yes.
That balances. I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so a part of the transfers in, the 3 million of it is actually netted to the
That's right.
estimate rate.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I apologize for that.
It's okay. But I
It's
do
just
have a
different
question about the
format.
transfers. I do have a question about the transfers. $8 million transfer out. But I know what that is, but why is it placed right there under the general fund?
Because it's money coming out of the general fund into another fund. It is basically a transfer out. Now, it is basically an appropriation.
But yeah, I guess that's the problem I'm having is the two numbers you have highlighted there is the budget, and the transfers out shouldn't even be there. We should be dealing with the numbers of the revenue and the appropriations. And then you got the transfers out, which makes it look like we're losing money, which we're actually just taking the net income and then transferring it out. So if anything, that $8 million should be below, the appropriation, the total appropriations, not up there to make it look like we're losing $4 million. Because we're actually, it looks like we're gaining $3 million. Just looking at the numbers here. We're actually, and where does that, how does that play into it? Because I was also looking, that's why I asked about last year's numbers, because I got last year's numbers, and it said, that we had basically 5 million in the same situation. So this year we got 3 million, 3 million point two, or 3, and then last year we had 5 million. And then I started looking at all these other numbers. We had 5 million last year, or the year before that. We had 4 million the year before that. So how does that number get spent? Because it goes into the fund, into somewhere. We're making a profit of millions of dollars. It goes into a fund, then we allocate the profit that we made to spend it somewhere else, and then we put it in here, make it look like we're losing money.
We're not making it look like anything.
Okay.
These are accounting standards on how we treat transfers out. Technically, a transfer out is an appropriation. And so we segregate them out so that the board is able to see what the transfers out are between funds. Because transfers out between one fund and another must balance each other out. You can't have one transfer in
And I'm not
from
saying
another one. So, if you prefer to call those transfers out appropriations, they are the same. They are transfers, they are expenditures, budgeted expenditures. They're just not gonna occur.
But they
in
come
the
out of
fund.
our retained earnings, essentially.
They come out of the fund balance.
That's the money that comes out of the retained earnings
Mhm.
from previous years. But we're
Yes.
taking it now and making it look like we're losing money when we're actually earning $3 million. Right there it says $3 million, $3.2 million that we are earning. And then you put transfers out, which is actually from previous years, this 5 million from this year and the 5 million from the year before, the 4 million and 3 million, all those millions of dollars. That's what that $8 million is. And I honestly think it's disingenuous to make it look like that's not what we're doing. Because that does not look like reality.
It is reality. It is a transfer out into the capital projects, into the debt service. The 8.1 million, in fact, there's a slide that identifies what the transfers are.
I'm with Josh. I'm totally confused about this.
those are the transfers out.
Look,
Can
are
you
we,
guys do this in your own private time if you wanna kinda go?
Well, I
dive
think
into
this is very important.
I know y'all think it's really important.
well,
But I don't know if that.
You don't think it's important that
Your
we're
witch hunt,
raising?
your witch hunt is not important to me at all.
A witch hunt?
It is a witch hunt, and it's not important to me
we're
at all.
not witch hunting, we're trying to get the balance, the things to balance out. We've got 55 million in revenue over here, which is what you think the property taxes are gonna be now? With the property taxes plus whatever.
We're
No,
budgeting,
so-
we are
no.
budgeting 55 million in revenue.
Yes.
We are budgeting 52 million in expenses. Okay, that's what we are budgeting, that's what we're looking at, that's what we're approving. This other stuff is just appropriations from previous year's retained earnings, or whatever, fund balance if you prefer, okay? I'm interested in why we are creating a situation where we have more revenue than actual expense. And if we're going to sit there and appropriate dollars, why don't we just reduce the, tax rate to reflect, like you said, a balanced budget, zero balanced budget, where we have revenue in, expenses out, and zero. And then you can appropriate all these transfers out, all you wanna do, that's fine, on the retained earnings from the years that we've overtaxed the people for all these years.
So,
That's what I'm looking at.
so you're saying we aren't making enough money, so let's reduce taxes so you have even less. Genius.
That's not what I'm saying at all, do you not understand what I'm saying?
I understand clearly.
Okay,
what
well,
you're
you can
saying.
look at all these years past, and it shows, we made $5 million in fiscal year, this is the audited, budget, 5 million at the end of 2018, 5.3 million. At the end of 2015, we made 4 million. At the end of 2016, we earned $5.8 million, 5.7 million. In 2017, we made, $5 million. We're profiting off the taxpayers. And I got a big problem with that.
Okay,
That's 10% of our revenue. We're making a 10% profit basically. When you sit there and say 55 million, and then we make 5 million of it, that's 10%.
You just don't understand.
I'm looking at the numbers. Do you understand?
If you, why don't you do this in your private time
he
for your
doesn't
witch hunt?
understand. Let me try to get to this. 2,375,000 down here is coming out of, it's coming out of the fund balance? Or is it coming out of the revenue? We've got in the net transfers out and in, and this is out,
And choice.
out of choice. Into where?
From choice to general fund.
From choice to general fund.
So it's in the 55 million, but it's not,
Yeah.
it is 52.
Yes, that's the difference.
So where, is this, is it this out of here? Yeah, but I'm looking on this line here. If it's out of here, it should be in here on that line, is it?
We're saying that the revenues are 4.9 for choice, and the expenditures are 2.5.
Right.
The difference, whatever they have there, is
2.3.
2.3, is gonna be transferred to general fund.
So how come it doesn't show up in the general? Fund.
What we did here in general fund was we put in the positive 2,000,003,
Yeah.
and then there's $8 million budgeted for transfers
the
out, we
difference
just
between-
netted it out.
Difference between
But
that
we
50,
could have done it in the,
52 up here,
and the
you
55.
have to add that to
Yes.
that 52.
Yes,
Okay. Does that make the 55?
it makes the 55.
Okay. So why in the world didn't we get that up here as a transfer in to get to that revenue?
Because what we were trying to do here, sir, was just net them out. All the transfers in and out, at the end, they need to be zero. That's what we were trying to do. Just the ins and the outs between the funds, as you can see at the bottom, is zero.
Yeah, but you need to have these two things balanced with each
Yes,
They
and we
they made a
can,
mistake, they've already assumed they're gonna fix
Okay.
that. That's,
other. All right,
I'm not,
okay.
I'm not really
But I'm
that
just-
concerned about
Okay,
that.
so that's, in effect, the, benefit, 22,375,000 goes on up to here. Okay, and that makes the 55, all right. All right,
The 55.2 million is your estimated revenue. Your appropriations are not just the appropriations, but also the transfer items.
Right, and that's what I'm
what
saying.
you're basically saying.
Yeah, and that's not what we're, I mean, those are
So you're
separate
taking-
items, those are capital expenditures and movement of number of dollars that we've already retained.
In essence, you are basically appropriating the 8.1 million that we're asking about. Those are transfers out, just right here. So 3.7 are one-time expenditures out of fund balance for capital projects. The debt service, 2.9 million, has to go to the debt service fund. The case is 550.
Okay, hold up, the debt service fund, that is our rent or lease payments.
Those are lease payments for the bonds.
so
Okay,
that's.
and that is not in our regular appropriations.
That is not in your appropriation, that is in your transfers out.
Are you saying that we're, taking a hit on that amount of money? In other words, we're paying for that debt service fund out of our surplus balance?
No, it's for a regular. The net amount of,
So why don't we have a lease payment? If
It's
we
an
have a lease
expense.
payment equal to that, then what are we doing here?
this is a transfer from the general fund into the debt service fund, it's the same number, it's just.
Okay, wait a minute, now I'm saying something different, I am understanding something different. Okay, are you saying that the actual lease payment is in the appropriations, this 51 million, 52 million?
It's in the transfer out.
Okay, so okay, I got that. Where are our lease payments? Not the debt service, what you're calling the lease payment, but the stuff that we pay for the buildings that we have.
That's the debt service fund.
Okay, now, can we borrow money? I didn't think we could borrow money, and I thought, and that's where my confusion is, I thought we had lease payments that we were paying for rent, basically, and now we've got transfers out for debt service. Is that appropriate, or
It is appropriate. You're talking about budgeting for the general fund, the transfer out of the general fund into the debt service fund. The payments are coming out and you see them monthly when we present them to you out of the debt service fund, and we transfer it from the general fund to the debt service fund. That is a normal
Yeah, but
process.
you're not treating it as an expense, that's what Josh is trying to say.
The expenses in the debt service.
In the debt service, we do account for it as an expense. In the general fund, we account for it as a transfer out.
what is the facility?
It's funding the revenue, because remember, the debt service fund has no money. We don't have an INS rate. So it has to come from somewhere. So somebody has to pay for it.
We realize that. What Josh is saying is that we have this debt that we're, in effect, we're not allowed to borrow. So we have this hypothetical situation where, in fact, we're paying the rent equal to the debt service.
Yes.
So why don't we show it as rent? That's what he's asking, as opposed to transferring it out somewhere that's not on the appropriations.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
When you pay rent, you write a check, and that's an expense.
That's the debt service fund.
Okay, why isn't it listed as a rent?
Because it is a principal and interest rate. We're following the fast track, the coding system that basically says that our principal and interest payments are on the debt service payment. The bond covenant, it doesn't call it a rent, it is a principal and interest payment of the rent. That's how we account for that.
Yeah, but the bond covenant is not with HCDE, it's with,
The PFC.
yeah, exactly, so that's what we're dealing with. So, where in this general fund line is that transfer out?
It's
It's
in.
down here in the bottom,
Yes.
other uses?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, basically, these are your expenditures, and these are additional expenditures down here.
They
But
are-
we're not putting any of those expenditures
Yeah, put
with,
it in the budget.
with the appropriate, facility that's being used by somebody?
No, it's not allocated. yet.
It's not allocated, this is not allocated.
No, we don't, they don't this is everything.
So,
It's not by
let's go back to a
facility.
smaller thing so that we can get our head, or I can get my head around this. The records management, okay, are we not allocating money to their facility?
Allocating money. to-
Okay, what is this for? What are the buildings that we're putting this $5 million a year into? What are the buildings?
Every building in the organization, every facility that we have.
So, we're not putting any facilities expenses into any of our budgeted usage, our expenditures. We're basically, all these budget items, and all the time we sit there and we come up with a calculation as to how much we're charging different entities. We're not accounting for the facility cost.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. You're talking about the internal service fund now. You changed just for a moment. Internal service fund, it is a facilities charge cost based on all their buildings. And so take all the insurance, all the utility, all the costs associated with every single building, and that is 5.1. 5.5.
5.1.
5.135.
5.1, 35, 951. That gets allocated based on a square footage basis of all their buildings.
Yeah.
And so everybody, every division gets a pro rata share of that cost.
See, that's the operating cost. What he's talking about is allocating the debt service based on what facility
No,
the
the
debt service
debt,
was
the
incurred.
debt we have not allocated, no.
We have not.
In that case, you're right in that sense.
Okay,
So
so
it's-
no, we gotta move on, but we don't have enough time to sit there and go through all this stuff, because I got a lot of
You
questions.
schedule it at your own
Well, I think we all need to understand what's going on.
That's what you think. And other,
Some
maybe
people
other,
just wanna rubber stamp it, I get it, I understand.
No, some of us understand how budget's set up.
and maybe if you don't, just do it on your own time.
That's what I'm trying to figure out here.
On your own time,
Do you
please.
understand what's going on here?
I understand
I don't think
perfectly
you do.
fine.
I don't think you do.
I don't care what you think.
Then-
Just, let's
then
move on.
don't talk.
Well, I can talk. It's a free country. If you don't like what I have to say,
You
too
don't like what I
bad.
have to say?
I just want you to do it on your own time. Just on your own time.
Folks, we got 20 minutes
Okay.
before it's
So I
showtime.
think we've got it,
Well,
we've got that.
let me then go through the,
Hang on, when we vote on the budget though, we're voting on those transfers out as well.
yes, sir.
Yeah, it's included in what we vote on. Okay. So it's not like it's there, but we don't have anything to say about it.
It is part of the budget. In the interest of time, I'd like to focus on this one page because everything else you have reviewed, and this is the draft. In the first presentation, in the first budget that we submitted was based on $463 billion of values. Since then, we got an estimate of $475 billion. Now, we don't know if that's going to hold or not. It just depends on what happens between now and August the 20th.
Yeah, but those estimates are usually understated.
So some of them, may be a little bit less or more, but this is our estimate as of this time. So I call that draft 2, based on 477 billion. Now, notice that if you follow the line, yellow line of the cross, on the column to the far left, it says 475,286,143.26. One of the reasons that I did not use 100% of the 477 billion, because the trend right now has been that there's about 1 or 2 billion that are not going to be materialized in the process of evaluation with the appraisal district and when folks have a claim or they file for an evaluation of the values. So I estimated 475 billion based on that. I also included a 99.25% collection rate. I also did not include a delinquent tax collection, because in the past, we've actually had, some refunds that have happened where it reduces our collection, so therefore, we did not estimate for that. In fact, we're gonna be at negative, right now, negative $100,000 in the delinquent collections because of the refunds that have been happening, by the tax office. And so that puts us at $24,435,071. And we plugged in some numbers, some preliminary numbers on the flipping taxation software and calculation, and arriving at a rate of 0.005145. Now, the effective tax rate on the calculation is 5149. And so we went below that number by 4 ticks to be able to reduce that down below the effective
So
tax rate.
you're saying that you took this 477 and reduced it to what?
475, you see,
Okay,
95,
475 there,
yeah.
okay.
95% will be at 451, and then only 23 billion will be added to give you 475 at the end.
Okay, so is that the certified taxable value?
Based on, right now, based on our estimates right now.
Okay, so you cut the 477
Yes, to 475.
to 475, so where's the 475?
In the yellow
In
at
the
the
yellow?
very end.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. 475. Okay, so that's not normally what happens. 477 usually goes up.
If it does, we'll see.
Yeah, but
in
what I'm
August the
saying is
20th.
you're basing your tax rate on an assumption that's not normally what happens. I
But
figured
this
it,
year was a little different. In fact, in the financial statement, you're gonna see a trend that we started with 449 billion at the beginning of the year when the board adopted the tax rate, and right now we're at 446.
it's below what we,
Yes, sir, just below. And that's the only reason why I did it,
Okay,
because
so-
of the trend.
okay, I understand.
And I won't know that
That's
until
because of part.
a month and a half from now, see what happens with the values. I mean, I will know that, when that goes up, of course, that number is
Yeah,
gonna
I'm
be
looking,
adjusted.
yeah, and I'm looking at the tax revenue, our tax revenue is going up 5%. Is that about right?
I'm sure it is.
Because I'm looking at 23.2 million versus 24.2 million, that's $1 million more, so that's roughly 5%. So we're increasing the taxes 5%.
During, the tax revenue, yes.
Not tax rate.
I'm not worried about rate.
No.
How do you get that 5%? This is last year?
That's current. That's $1 million.
No, this year's not that.
Huh?
So this is not that. This is
That's not the full
complete.
year?
No.
No, it's only till March.
The 23 million is not the full year?
The 23.2 cents of March. That's right.
You got it.
I don't have any current numbers.
You will see the
In
most,
June.
at the financial statement, when we present, you will see the one as of
June.
June.
And what does that number look like?
It's roughly about $300,000 more.
Okay, not less, but
Yes,
with the
probably
rebates.
be a little bit more, yes, sir.
Most of the collections have come in.
Yes, the majority of the collections
not
coming,
really gonna change
there's about $500,000 right now that we have not collected, as of right now, from the budget to actual, about 590,000 from the other. And you will see that in the report for today. I'll highlight that whenever I get to it, but you will see there is an connection.
Just to tell everybody, when I did my calculations, I calculated that it could be as low as 4.956 or something like that.
The tax increase?
Less than a half a cent. Now, tax rate,
Not worried about the rates, I'm worried about the actual tax burden.
cut the rate,
I'm talking about the tax burden, not the rate.
well, but you have a bigger tax base. You have more people
I
paying.
understand,
tax.
you're exactly right.
Okay, so it doesn't, it's not what you're saying.
What,
Because
the
you,
taxes
because
are
you
going up?
added people to the, that you have to service.
But the taxes are going up.
Well, yeah.
I'm not talking about, I'm talking about $20-something million that we're responsible for. Okay, go ahead.
You're serving more people. So if you cut the rate and you're still getting more tax, you have to serve more people on the taxes that you have. You can't say, it's not stagnant.
Again, this is a preliminary estimate, this is draft two. The values we're gonna get probably about August the 20th, 25th, around that time. Hopefully we'll get them before the board meeting in August, but most of the time we get it until after the 20th. And so we'll probably present those at the September board meeting so we can see what the value of the impact would be at that time. Again, this is just an estimate, a draft two, if you will. And so I wanted to show you the comparison from the original to today based on the assumptions that we have so far. In the expenditure that we have embedded into our budget. We will do not a net amount of the transfers to make sure that we address your question, dealing with, and I agree with you, I think, if anything, I would expect to see the 55 million right there as well. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that, because what we did is we netted out, and in our world, we try to net out our transfers even out, but I can see that you need to see those and be able to trace it to the other presentation. The core of our budget is our general fund, which is the 55 million that you mentioned. We have about 40 million in appropriations of our grants, and those are the federal, primarily federal grants that we receive, and that's money that gets spent there.
And we don't have a lot of control over that, that's just in and out.
That's the control from the federal government. They pretty much tell you, you want this money, you gotta do this, and you gotta spend it that way.
And we trust you to just do what the federal government tells you to do.
Or state, in
Yeah.
this case, so there's some state dollars in here.
So is that, and I guess that's where I'm trying to separate what our duties versus what, you're mandated.
Sure, sure.
Okay.
Now, the debt service, for lack of, we wanted to track the debt service, and usually an organization has a tax rate for debt service. We do not have one. And so when we have the payments in the debt service fund, we have to have revenue coming in from somewhere else. In this case, it's the general fund. Now, could have just left that into the general fund and paid out of the general fund, and you will see it in the general fund. You will not even bother with the debt service fund, but it is a general fund source that needs to come in and pay the debt service fund. The other one that you see there, Kate's local match of $550,000, that is a transfer from the general fund into the special revenue fund to attract federal dollars. It's a local match for a federal grant that basically gives us over 1.5 million to be able to do that. It's just a good match to have you. You commit to $550,000 and you're gonna get a little over $1 million in return. The Head Start Coolwood, again, and we have actually an update. I know that we may not be able to have an update for you, but there's a press for time. But we have an update for Coolwood in the sense that we may not need that $500,000. We're trying to prepare an application that will allow us for them to waive the in-kind and the match for that project and receive some indirect monies to be able to implement that project.
And that's the Harvey stuff.
And that's the Harvey that we mentioned. Now, the value of that Coolwood project is probably gonna change because of that, because we're gonna ask for a little more, about $1 million more in the grant in order for us to do that. Last time I mentioned to you, it was gonna be about a $4.8 million project. It may end up being a $5.8 million project because we're gonna ask for them for additional money so that they can waive our in-kind money, and also they can give us some indirect costs to oversee the project, to monitor, to comply with it, and what have you. So yes, the number is gonna change, because I know you mentioned that, this is a certain number, and I can tell you that exactly, that that's gonna be a certain number. It's going to probably vary depending on what the application looks like.
But we'll look at that in any kind of budget.
Yes,
amendment.
well, in fact, we're gonna probably have a feasibility meeting again
Mhm.
to give you that in more detail, because it's a lot more that has evolved. Ms. Peacock has met with the federal technical assistant folks, and they've encouraged us to apply. There's over $650 million available for projects, which they encourage us to submit an application and add things that we need for this building, and including the indirect costs and the waiver of the in-kind match. So, doesn't say it's like they're gonna be pre-approved, but it looks good that we might want to do that and move forward with that. But that's a separate, an own meeting altogether. It's gonna have, I'm just trying to give you a little bit of an update dealing with Coolwood. And then the operating normally that we transfer for Head Start is $350,000 out of the indirect costs that we receive. We receive a little over almost $1.2 million from federal funds, of which $350,000 goes back to the Head Start program through indirect costs. And so that kind of runs off the transfers out. And so the transfers out in essence are an expense, an appropriation that is built into the budget. It's just separated separately so you can see which ones stay in the fund and which ones go to another fund. And that's why you see them there. If us in the accounting world sometimes have a tendency of have terminology, lingo, apologize for that, because government accounting in essence, it's its own terminology. In the private sector, you just basically have in sources and out sources, revenues and expenses, and that's it. There's really no other type of terminology for it. But we sometimes have in government have a tendency of having a little bit more identification of what some of those transfers are. So, but lesson taken that
Such
we
as
need
showing
to-
the debt service fund separately,
Yes,
even
sir.
though it's coming out of the budget.
Yes, sir. I mean, but again, this is a governmental thing that, we set it aside as a debt service fund. Again, in the private sector, you don't do that. You basically put it all in one account, and you'll be able to see revenues and expenses and what have you. In governmental, we have a debt service fund, and that is used for, and governmental standards to say basically, you have a debt service fund, pay for principal and interest of your debt, and who's gonna fund it? Taxes, well, you don't have a tax rate, therefore you have a transfer in from the general fund. Again, it's just technical.
Yeah,
and-
we shouldn't use the word debt, if we're not supposed to have debt. So, we can go around and sit there and say, the government says this, the government says that, well, the government says we're not supposed to be in debt. So when we call it debt, we're actually acknowledging that it is debt. And then we're sitting there, transferring it in to another entity, and then not even allocating the cost of that in all of our different divisions. And I think that's problematic. So we can continue on, or we can continue to just banter back and forth, but let's move on, we got a meeting to get to, and we'll continue to.
Josh, all government entities show a debt service fund. City of Houston, Harris County.
Couldn't understand.
But not all of them have.
They all are allowed to
They're
charge
allowed
that
to.
tax
Yeah.
too.
So that's the difference between us.
Yeah,
So-
but we don't have a tax rate. That's, we have a general fund.
They usually call it P&L or
Um,
Got 5 minutes.
So, the property values growth here the last 4 or 5 years, 338 billion, and then it has gone up consistently. Now we're at 477, and so that's an increase of about 27 billion increase from one year to the next. That's an extraordinary increase from, the only other one that has happened like that is in 17, and then in 16 as well, 55 billion as well. And so there's been quite a lot of growth in, here in the area in terms of values. And the tax rate has continued to decline over the last, this is the 6-year history, and we continue to do that. Again, I mentioned that as an estimate, 0.005145, it's an estimate because, again, please do not hold to that number because it is an estimate given the variables that we have so far, and that is a dynamic type of value that is gonna change probably by August the 20th. This is the presentation or the handout that I mentioned to you. Again, I just wanna mention that all this presentation is posted on our website, the PowerPoint, all these slides that identify these assumptions into our budget. These are the grants that we talked about, early Head Start case, adult ed case 7.2, and 4.4 in grants. This is the fund balance activity. In essence, this is the general fund. We started with 25 million, we have 55 inflows of revenue, 60 million in appropriation, including transfers and including one-time expenditures from our fund balance, and that leaves us with 20.3 projected fund balance 12 months from now.
Well, the 60 million includes
Yes.
capital outlay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
For the income structure.
The 8 million and the transfer side. Yes, sir.
Basically, what we're doing is funding our building
We're
expansion.
going, yeah, we're doing the
capital.
same, we just repeated this, this is,
Yes, and
Same
we kind of, it's just in a little different format. What those projects are is basically continuing and finishing up the AB West, AB East, adult ed facilities, a little bit of a follow from the Fortis from last year, and then building upgrades, replacement projects. So those are the projected projects for the new year.
Yeah.
And then, this is our fund balance, of which out of that 20.3, 17 are unassigned, 3% committed, 7% assigned, and 89% unassigned. And so you want anywhere between 20 to 25% of your fund balance to, we're probably around 23 after this is done, so we'll be right now we're at 26. After the expenditure, we'll be around 23, 24% fund balance.
Your fund balance, what you're telling us though is not really, because you're using a percentage based on your total revenues, which aren't tax revenues mostly. So you've got a fund balance that's equal to one year's taxes. Nobody has a fund balance to that.
Yeah, we need to.
What I'm just saying is that you're saying you want a fund balance of 20 to 25%, but that's 25% of the 100 million, not 25% of the expenses that you would have. If you were to lose all of that the grants and all that stuff, you would have a huge fund balance based on what was left.
Yeah, because of the debt of the grants, we need to spend the money first and then get reimbursed 30 days later. And
we
that,
should be able to create some kind of accrual to account for that, so that we can look at it and say, this is what we're gonna get back on this particular money, not just sit there and have a loss on the financials that you give us, because that's confusing. Because when I ask the question, then you say, well, it's an accrual. So, well, an accrual, you understand?
yeah, of course, we accrued
Yeah, I just wanna know, well, your best estimate as to what it would be currently when you give us a financial, and just, because when I ask the question, why is there so much money in a loss, $300,000 loss with regard to, the documents? I mean, if we're gonna get money back, we should be able to accrue that, so that I understand how much we're actually losing, or what we're gonna have to do as far as tax dollars to supplement that. Anyway, I have a question about reserves. Is that in the unassigned? So the unassigned, we have 17 million, and we are reserving, what is, you're saying 25% of the
That's
50
what-
million?
That's what makes up, that's 17.7, that's what we're.
Right, and how much of that do we have basically to cover our reserve, our desired reserve? Is 25%? Is that what you're wanting, is 25%? Okay, and that's 25% of what number is that?
59.9.
Okay, and that number comes from the 51 million of allocated expenses plus the 8 million of transfers. Okay, and you want, so we're at 3.55 months at 26%?
That's not,
And that's the whole nut, that's,
that's everything, no, it's not just, this, the funds that we spend on, the taxes are spent on. That's what, the point I was trying to get is, this is, if we were to shut down all of our grant activities and all, we would still have that 17.
on
Yeah,
that 59 million, how much of that is expense, is considered an expense that we would allocate for choice partners?
We didn't- None of it, you know, it's enterprise fund.
Because that's a different
So
proprietary.
it's not, that's completely separate, okay?
Although we have to, make sure that we have enough cash flow to make sure that their revenues don't come in all of them at the beginning. So we have to kind of, upfront some of the cash flow so that they can operate.
Okay, and are we allocating in this their facilities funds? Facilities?
Yeah.
So that is in there, what we do for choice, the 59 million, we have expenses in there.
We
That
have
we are actually
expenses.
creating reserves for that.
Reserves for.
You said
Choice.
26%, 26.2% is our reserve. 26.6% is our reserve. Okay. Of the $59 million, or I guess I'm just gonna say 60 million, okay? A certain amount of that expense has to do with choice partners and some of these other outfits, right?
It's about 2.5 million.
Okay, so we're reserving for those things also.
A portion of it.
Yeah. Okay,
Uh,
all right.
I want to challenge that a little bit. Because you keep saying we have to reserve for basically what we are due but haven't collected. But the only reserve you need is the difference between last year's uncollected at the end of the year and this year's. Because at the first of the year, you're gonna be collecting money that was on last year's due. So the only thing you need a reserve for is the increase in what's due, which is much smaller. Everybody understand that?
What time is it? It's 1:05. Sorry for taking.
I'm packing up.
I know you don't like being late.
Backing up.